Welcome back to Live at 9. Jackson's finest journalist here from Jim Hill High School. And tell me, how'd you kind of get into journalism?
You know, so I got into journalism. I went to the University of Southern Mississippi in Hattiesburg, 2011, 2015. And then once I went to Southern Miss, I said to myself, coming out of high school, I wanted to stay in sports. You know, my sports career didn't go very far. As you can see, I'm not a very big guy, not really tall or whatever. So I wanted to still stay in sports. And so then I attended Southern Miss and got into writing for the student newspaper, The Student Prince. And then I found out that I wanted to do things on air for TV. So I kind of got a combination of doing that on air, doing some writing for radio, and I liked the experience that I was getting, and so I said, you know what, let's see if I can make a career out of this. I didn't know what it was going to look like, because initially I thought that I would just wanted to be on air, but then I found out when I went to grad school that I wanted to write more. And so I pretty much parlayed that video experience into writing full-time more, and then I also knew that I wanted to get back on air, and I wanted to be able to have that experience of doing the writing and being on camera at the same time.
Do you, or are you able to give back a little bit to like Jim Hill and some of the Jackson public schools?
Yeah, so when I initially graduated from Southern Miss, it was a group that was a part of the IB program. I was an IB student at Jim Hill. We gave this scholarship called a Circle of Excellence Scholarship, and so it was basically given to an IB student that had a promising career going into college, not necessarily just a four-year institution, but a four-year institution, a two-year institution, all of that. So we tried to find a way to give back to those students, because a lot of times when we were coming out of high school, we didn't always have those opportunities to get funding to go to school.
That's awesome. I mean, you've come from a lot, and you know, talk about your time at Jim Hill and where you probably pictured yourself and where you are now.
Man, when I left Jim Hill, I remember it. I always tell this story a little bit. When I first left Jim Hill, I told my mom when she was taking me for orientation at Southern Miss, I said, Mom, am I going to do well? Like, I don't know if I'm going to be...
It was different.
Right. It was very different. I didn't know if I was going to be fully prepared. And so she tells me this story all the time, like, of course you're going to be prepared. You've been prepared. God has ordered your steps in the way that they were supposed to be. And so when I got to Southern Miss, I thought to myself, I wanted to be the next Stuart Scott. I wanted my picture on the wall at Southern Miss as this next great broadcaster, but I realized that my true passion was in writing. Not that I wanted to deviate from video or being on air or being on TV full time, but I knew that my passion was writing, and I wanted to be able to parlay that.
By the way, the way you talk right now, you would have been just fine on TV. I just want you to know that. You haven't stumbled one bit. I'm stumbling more than you are. I guess you now become a writer, and you said, okay, I want my face on the wall. You know, Rick Cleveland's face is on the wall there. So
absolutely.
You've worked for Sports Illustrated at times. Now you're moving into something else. Where are you trying to take your route right now in writing? So after being laid off from Sports Illustrated, now I've been freelancing for ESPN's Anscape, this other platform called The Next Hoops, which covers like women's basketball, the WNBA. We do a lot of coverage with that. And then I've also did some writing for the Sporting News, particularly when the Olympics happened back in August. And so between that, also teaching and doing more things on air. So like I've been able to be a part of some HBCU sports shows where we talk about, you know, the biggest headlines in HBCU sports, things of that nature. And what's it like covering your city, Jackson State?
Man, as a person who grew up in Jackson.
Were you a Jackson State fan as a kid?
I was. That was like my first entrance to sports, period. Like, I think one of my first games was Jackson State Alcorn when it used to be called the Capital City Classic. Of course, now it's the Soul Bowl. But, you know, that was my first entrance into what sports looked like for me, other than being like most kids watching, you know, Sports Center and, you know, the people that you saw on air reporting the news, even just reading the newspaper, the Clarion Ledger. Like, that was one of my first interests to writing and seeing sports writing.
So does it mean a lot for you to be someone from Jackson covering HBCUs, you know, even though you went to Southern Miss?
Yeah, it does. I mean, because it was my interest. Now, granted, I love Southern Miss. Actually, when I was at Southern Miss, I loved covering sports. One of my first assignments working for the student newspaper was women's basketball. Ironically, I'm heavy into women's sports.
You post about the WNBA all the time. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yep. So it's just like, you know, being able to parlay those experiences and being able to cover the sports in Jackson, specifically with Jackson State, I mean, it means a lot. I mean, some of the first people that I was introduced to, you talk about the coach now, I watched TC as a kid. I watched his quarterback, Robert Kent, as a kid. Like, these were people that I grew up watching, like, oh my God, like these were, you know, at the time, mythical figures to me. And now seeing TC lead the program to where it is and you know, and the trajectory of where the program is going, it's just good to be able to watch.
Well, I think that kids should be watching you thinking you're Superman, because you've done a lot from the Jackson Public Schools to Southern Miss to what you do now. The reason I wanted to bring you on here is because I think you're a very big inspiration to people in journalism with your effort. I mean, look at the way he dressed. He's as prepared as he comes. You know, he was never going to show up sloppy, and I just wanted to make sure that your story kind of gets told a little bit. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. We'll be right